I am a kindergarten teacher, so give me grace as I have my papers, because public speaking was never something that I ever thought I would be adding to my kindergarten teacher resume. So I will use my notes, but it's just kind of my clutch. So like she said, I'm Amy Verhelst, and I'm so honored to be here today with this organization. As the 2025 South Dakota Teacher of the Year, I have had the opportunity to share my story in many capacities. I've talked to a lot of pre-service teachers. I have spoken at literacy conferences, and what I do is I share my story, right? In here, you are not going to get the level of knowledge that you got from Pete Bowers this morning, but I think that telling your story matters and showing that change matters. And but I am so honored to be in this space with all of the people here who are supporting our striving readers, and just being amongst others that have the same passion and philosophies that I do. So yes, I'm a kindergarten teacher, but the story I'm about to tell you today is about reading. So whether you're a classroom teacher or an interventionist, parent, or an advocate, school board member, that's so awesome. This story is for all of you, right? Because this story isn't just about reading. It is a story about empathy and what happens when knowing better changes everything. Now I have this slide. I'll show it again at the end. It's just my Padlet. I needed to just start dumping all of my resources and things on my Padlet, and some of the things on my Padlet, you'll see me actually teaching my kindergarten students some of the research-based practices, podcasts and things that I follow and whatnot. But I'll show it again at the end too. So my journey didn't start when I became a teacher. It started long before that. Oh gosh, my clicker. Hopefully this clicker works. There we go. Okay. Here we go. You're sitting in science class, and your textbook is open in front of you. One by one, your classmates are taking their turns reading aloud. Their voices sound so smooth and so effortless, while inside you are filled with turmoil, wondering, why does reading come so easy for everyone else but never for you? Your stomach is in knots. Your hands are clammy against the page. Your leg is bouncing up and down frantically as you're sitting on the edge of your chair. And you're sitting there and you count ahead. 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. This is my paragraph. You start whisper reading that paragraph over and over again under your breath. But no matter how many times you read it, you still get stuck on that one big word. And you're reading this over and over again, and the voices that you hear are moving closer and closer. It's almost your turn, and your heart is pounding so loudly that you can't even hear what's happening around you. All you can think is, don't mess up. Don't sound dumb. Don't let them know. That student we were just sitting with was me. And maybe for some of you, it was you. So from the time I was a little girl growing up in Parkston, South Dakota, I had always dreamed of being a teacher. Here's my funny side note about this. When my son saw my picture on this, he goes, "Mom, you look like a muffin." Yes, I do. This is actually me in kindergarten, and I always show my kindergarten students that I was just like you guys. Like, I can connect with you, right? But I always wanted to be a teacher. I had the best teachers. I had Mrs. Maxwell in my preschool, and she just had that magical way of making you feel loved and special and valued and important. And she made the teaching profession just look like the most amazing job in the world, right? So it was my dream job to become a teacher. But, and I was the very good student. I was definitely the teacher's pet. Look at her. She followed all the rules in the classroom, right? And she loved her teachers and was just starry-eyed when in their presence. But behind that smile and bad haircut, thanks, Mom, I had a secret. I really struggled to read. And I didn't want anyone to know, because I didn't want anyone to think that I was dumb. I didn't want my parents to know, my siblings. I didn't want my peers to know, and I definitely didn't want to let my teachers down and let them know. And it was so frustrating for me because I couldn't understand why it was so easy for why reading seemed so easy for everyone else and it never seemed easy for me. And I just kept thinking there must be something wrong with me. So that belief stayed with me. It is deeply ingrained in me and honestly has turned into a mental battle that I still fight today. I'm not good enough. I don't belong here. Those words just don't disappear. They settle in and they shape how you see yourself. I carried constant self-doubt and negative self-talk and all of those beliefs into every classroom that I sat in as a child. No matter how great or how much I loved my teacher, that's what I believed in myself. And when it came to learning how to read, it was always the same. The guidance from my teachers was always the same thing, right? English is hard. It doesn't make sense. We just have to memorize these words. But memorizing never worked for me. And trust me, I tried, right? I tried to memorize everything that my teachers told me how to memorize. One, because I didn't want my friends to know that this was hard for me. And two, I'm the oldest daughter in my family, so I have unrealistically high expectations of myself. And I was not going to let my teachers down or anybody down. So I worked so hard every single day. But no matter how hard I tried, I could memorize it one day and lose it the next. So I was really living this fake it till you make it mantra. Let me tell you, that's exhausting every day. So over time, that feeling of not being very smart really began to take a toll on me, and it changed what I saw for my future. My dream of becoming that teacher slowly turned into a compromise. I started thinking, well, you don't have to be that smart to teach kindergarten, right? They have playtime, and I think they still have rest time. Like, I love kids. I can do that. So I chose this profession now, not because I felt like it was my dream anymore, but I chose it because I believed that was all I was capable of doing. So it wasn't until my education classes in college that the pieces finally started to click for me. And for the first time in my life, I felt smart. And that was new. That was a very new feeling for me. I really, really loved my education classes. And I was doing really good once I got past those awful gen ed classes. Once I was in my ed classes, it was like, yes, okay. I can do this. Maybe I could be a pretty good teacher, maybe even a great teacher. So I walked into my first classroom with this whole newfound confidence, and I spent many of my summer days making my classroom look fun and making it inviting. And so that year I was going to be teaching junior kindergarten, and that position in the district had typically been a very high turnover rate. Like, it was your step into the district, nobody stayed there. So nothing was really established or sustained, and I didn't even have curriculum. So I did what most teachers do, and I really just started to piece things together on my own. Right? I spent countless hours creating my own materials, scouring Pinterest and Teachers Pay Teachers. And then once I actually started teaching, I had this terrifying realization that I actually have no idea how to teach these kids how to read. I got all the cute stuff, I don't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. So, but, I showed up every day with the best intentions and so much love for my students, and it was a really good first year. So the next year, you can imagine how excited I was when I got to move up to kindergarten. So I got to loop with my kids, and I was really excited because I was going to finally be given a reading curriculum. And I just remember feeling so relieved and finally, I'm going to have the answers on how to teach these kids how to read. Unfortunately, what I was handed was a balanced literacy curriculum. And I know everybody in the room here, but we're going to speak to the online people who maybe are learning about science of reading. So with the balanced literacy, maybe you remember some of these strategies from when you were in class or how you used to teach or teach maybe till today. Did you use strategies like, did you look at the pictures? Does it sound right? Does it look right? What is the first sound in the word? Let's guess what it will be, and we'll match it to the picture. Or the books that I was teaching my students to read, did they have that same predictable pattern where it's, they went to the park, they went to the store, so that, you know, we could figure it out by just guessing. So these strategies that were built into this curriculum, it was not teaching our kids to read. It was teaching them to memorize text and guess at words. But I taught these strategies because that's what my teacher's manual said to do, and that's how I had been taught growing up. And at the time, I trusted that it was right. So soon I was teaching my own students to memorize sight words, and when they asked why a word was spelled a certain way, I heard the voice of my teacher come out of my own mouth and say, "English is hard, it doesn't make sense. We just have to memorize these things." But that never felt right to me because I tried it and I couldn't do it. Memorizing never worked for me. So I began to try something different. While the teacher manual pointed me towards guessing and memorization, my intuition pushed me in a different direction. Now, get this, right? I actually started to have my kindergarten students sound out words. Revolutionary, right? Like, I thought I was just this genius that let's have them sound out the words. Let's use the decodables that this balanced literacy program has that none of the other teachers like because they're boring and they're not as fun and the pictures aren't good. Like, I was like, yeah, this is what I should do. Like, let's have them start sounding out these words. And then I was like pointing out rule breakers and like saying like, well, this is what happens when O and U are together, but only in some words. But in this one, it says ow, right? And and back then, like I didn't have the language for it or the understanding of what I was doing. Quite honestly, I thought I was making it up, right? Because those were the kinds of things that I had to tell myself so that I could learn how to read. But I was unknowingly teaching my kindergarten students how to decode. And not very well either. But I also leaned into music, and I sing a lot in my classrooms. Elena knows that. She'll walk by the door, and I'm always singing something. And but I was teaching. I have a song for like every high frequency word, right? So they could memorize the spelling. It's fun. It's enjoyable, and like kids still remember it to this day. But anyway, so I had my songs and I had my little decoding secrets, and I truly believed what I was doing was enough for these kids. And for some kids, it did help. But for others, it was not enough. Because trying harder only gets you so far when you don't actually understand what you're doing. So then I moved to a new state, new school, same curriculum, right? And I'm feeling really good about my tricks and how to teach reading. And that's when I met Joshua, and I will never forget him. So, Joshua, this kid had the most energy ever, right? He had the energy of like a Pokemon mixed with Jim Carrey, and he would come like barreling in the room every day like, hello, everybody. And he would have the entire class like crying in laughter, me included, when he was doing his spot on like Grinch impersonations and stuff. Oh, he was just so much fun, so much fun. So I don't legally have a picture that I can share of Joshua. So here's a AI-generated photo of what Jim Carrey would look like as a kindergartner. It's so good, right? I love AI. And so Joshua was great, right? He was so fun. He was so vibrant. He was brilliant in all the ways that do not show up on paper. But Joshua couldn't read. When we would read together, you would hear that wavering in his voice, that desperate hope of wanting so badly to get it right, mixed with that crackling anxiety of knowing that he's probably going to get it wrong again. He'd guess, pause, guess again, and each time hoping that maybe this is the time that I'll get it right. And then came the whine. Right? The whine that every parent and teacher knows, that sharp, high-pitched, I can't do this. The sound you hear when a child is right on the edge of giving up, even before they try. I knew Joshua cared deeply. That kid had the biggest heart in the world. He wanted to read. He felt the weight of not being able to. He knew his peers could. He already felt behind. He just wanted to belong. So what did I do? Did what my curriculum and my training taught me. I had him read those same terrible, predictable texts over and over again, just hoping that he would memorize these words long enough so it would appear as though he was reading, so we could at least celebrate some of his success, and he could feel good about himself for a little bit. Took away his recess to give him extra practice, and honestly, because as like a consequence, because you didn't work hard while we had time in the classroom to work. I used my little word tricks, I sang the songs, I did everything that I knew how to do because I cared deeply too and I wanted so badly to help him. But in the back of my head, I knew he wasn't actually reading. And I just had that voice that kept screaming, this didn't work for you. Why are you doing this to him? So reading honestly became a punishment. He hated it. I really started to hate it. We both dreaded it. And then one day, during one of our sessions, during the peak of both of our frustrations, he looked up at me and he said, "My brain is ugly." My brain is ugly. Now, I always have a hard time with this because I love this kid so much. I can't even say those words without having my heart shattered all over again. That secret that I carried my entire life, my entire childhood, that feeling that I was dumb, that something was wrong with me, I was now giving that exact same feeling to this beautiful child. I was the reason that this happy, goofy kid thought there was something wrong with his brain. Sorry for all the tears. I didn't bring Kleenexes to my talk. But I have a Maya Angelou quote hanging up in my classroom. Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. That moment with Joshua was the devastating proof that I did not know better yet. So I kept having students like Joshua. I kept telling them what I thought was best. You have to keep practicing. You're not working hard enough. Let's practice at recess. Let's read at home. Because that's what I had to do as a student. But that's not what works for these kids. So it wasn't until my 6th year of teaching, 6 years I did this, right? That I finally started to find the answers on how to teach reading. And after moving back to South Dakota, I met an incredible educator and mentor, Elena Besnicek. And at the time when Elena and I had this one conversation, I had no idea that what I was going to learn was going to change everything. But it did. That moment with Elena reshaped how I see myself, how I see my students, how I teach, and honestly, the entire direction of my career. And she simply asked me, "Hey, have you listened to the podcast Sold a Story?" Okay, for those of you who don't know or who haven't listened to, everybody's in here like, yes, yes, yes. But Sold a Story is an investigative podcast that examines how reading has been taught in our schools for decades and how well-intentioned practices like balanced literacy and guessing at words became so widespread, despite not aligning with how the brain actually learns to read. And the results left many students, especially our striving readers, guessing, compensating, and falling behind. And listening to that podcast hurt. It felt like when I listened to it, It felt like somebody was finally speaking the truth that I had carried in silence for all of those years. For the first time, my experience had a name. And then I realized how many others shared it. I felt seen. I felt validated. And then I felt angry, right? If you've listened to it, how do you not get angry? Not at my teachers. Not mad at my teachers. I love my teachers, right? They did the best they could with the tools that they had. My anger was directed at this systemic problem that had let so many of us down. That podcast was my entry point into the science of reading. And understanding now the research that finally explained why reading was so hard for me and why so many students were still struggling today. The research that showed how the brain learns to read and how we can teach it. So I was really angry, right, at the version of myself that learned to doubt herself and never felt enough. I was angry for my students and all the students in our country who had been disserviced by these same flawed ideas. And then I had to carry that painful weight of knowing the way that I was taught and the way that I was teaching now was failing students. As I listened, my mind immediately went back to Joshua and all the students that I watched struggle. That guilt of not knowing was so overwhelming. But now I had clarity. It hurt to listen to that podcast, but it was a good hurt. The kind of hurt that instills this new passion and fire and responsibility to do something. So, forgot to click to my sides. There's the podcast, right? So after I listened to that whole podcast, then I listened to Natalie Wexler's The Knowledge Gap. And once again, I was floored by what I was learning now about the importance of knowledge building and writing instruction, and that it is not happening in our schools. So as I learned more, I started seeing these same patterns everywhere. We have students who are struggling to read. We have teachers who were never taught how reading actually works. We have curriculum that is not always aligned with research. And we have systems that are still catching up to what we know is right and what is best for kids. But once I began to see those problems clearly, I also began to see where solutions begin. I always kind of think of myself as a problem solution person, right? I'm not going to sit in this problem and not do something about it. So those are a lot of problems, right? Those are big problems. You can't solve all those overnight. So my first step in change was at a level where I had the most control. My classroom and my own knowledge. Now, this transformation, we'll get there in a second, sorry. This transformation wasn't a perfect overnight switch. It was a long process of learning and unlearning with plenty of challenges along the way. But that moment that I started aligning my practices with starting aligning my instruction with research-based practices, I saw immediate growth. You know, that kind of growth that gives you the teacher goosebumps. The joy was not just seeing some of my students succeed like I had in the past. It was seeing all of them starting to thrive. My students became more engaged. They became more confident. And that skepticism that I once had about teaching reading was replaced now with this confidence because I finally understood what I was teaching and why it worked. The most powerful change in my classroom did not come from a new program. It came from a teacher who finally understood how reading works. So as my classroom, or as my instruction shifted, the physical and visual environment of my classroom shifted too. So in this wall, this is my sound wall, where students start to learn about their phonemes and how sounds are produced and how we can represent those sounds and words with our letters. And I wish I would have brought it with me. I have a Halloween skeleton head, and he has a movable jaw. His name is Bobby Bones. He's my ex-boyfriend. It didn't work out. And so Bobby Bones, he's just one of the fun ways to make this tangible and understandable for kids. So I get Bobby Bones out and I teach the kids Vowel Valley, and I say, like, inside your cute little kindergartner heads, this is your skull and this is your jaw, and you move your jaw up and down, and the higher you are in Vowel Valley, our jaw is going to be closed more, and the farther down you get in Vowel Valley, your jaw is going to open. So when my kids are stuck, if they can't get the difference between and we get Bobby Bones out and we see that there's just a slight shift in what your jaw is doing. Just making it fun, making it come to life for them. And then another wall in my classroom that I honestly don't know how I could teach without it. This is my secret stories wall. And back when I first started teaching and I thought I was making up these little secrets and these little codes, somebody did it way better than I did. And I was like, when Elena taught this to me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I kind of did this, and this is so great. And it is so fun teaching the kids these little secrets and how letters work together inside words, and they just become these expert decoders, and they're unlocking the code and they're becoming readers, right? They can read anything that comes their way. And then across the room, I wish I could show you literally every domain that I've done. But at the time I worked on this slideshow, we were working on our Native American domain. And we're creating graphic organizers, and we're working on vocabulary, and we're using visuals and tools that help the students understand and organize what they're learning about the world. And they're a part of this, and then we use this as our daily background, our background knowledge, and continuously building on that. And it's just so fun, like just being in my classroom. I just love it. It's my favorite space. But it wasn't just my classroom walls that changed, right? It was my instruction too. So I focused on building my own knowledge and strengthening my strategies for teaching word recognition skills, language comprehension skills, and then also how to use data. So when I was focusing on my word recognition skills, being very intentional about phonemic awareness with a big focus, obviously in kindergarten, on segmenting and blending. And then moving into that phonics and those word patterns so that my students not only could read these words, but they were starting to write those words too. And then ultimately with having those skills down and being awesome, right? My kids practiced these not just in isolation, but they became fluent in these skills and they became confident in using them. I have an entire PD just on that section. I'm like, I can't do it today because I would take another hour. But I love teaching that component of my day and just doing the professional developments and practicing and doing it and reflecting, just growing in that space and my knowledge. So alongside with that word recognition is language comprehension. And my school uses CKLA Amplify, and I truly could not love it more. The topics that we cover are so rich, and we get to go so deep into the content. And my students are building vocabulary and that background knowledge, and they're truly understanding the world around them and how everything is connected. And just the conversations that we're having and the oral language that they're using and what we're learning about. So, so one of the most powerful parts of using a knowledge-based curriculum is the way that we keep connecting. So not to like go into like how to teach knowledge building, but one of the things that I love about this is you have to, for example, I just showed you Native Americans. You have to have a deep understanding of the way of their life, like how the Native Americans lived. And you have to understand that information. Then we go to kings and queens because now we're studying like world history and how that affects moving into, well, seasons and weather is fun. We'll talk about that later. But to understand Christopher Columbus and the Pilgrims and how if you didn't have the background knowledge on Native American studies, and if you didn't have the background knowledge on world history with kings and queens, how in the world are you going to be able to have students grasp the concept of Christopher Columbus and the significance of them coming to the New World? My kids are like, Christopher Columbus is not that smart. It wasn't a new world. The Native Americans have been here forever. But like for a kindergartner to have that concept and be able to understand that, that is why I love this really, really rich curriculum. And you know, a lot of times people will be like, well, kindergartners should not be learning about that. But they can, and they can understand it, and they conceptualize it, and it's just beautiful when they make those really deep connections. Okay, no, I totally lost my spot because I love gushing over this stuff. Yeah, they're connecting their ideas, they're applying their knowledge, and they have the confidence now that they can talk about these topics and they're not overwhelming and scary. And then I also love that moving on, they will continuously hit on topics that will build on this as they go to first grade, second grade, third grade. So my favorite part then, so you have all this knowledge, right? We have our word recognition skills, we have our language comprehension, then we get to do my favorite thing, which is writing, right? How many teachers can say, I love writing, right? Because we probably didn't have the training that we should have at the pre-service level. But I dove in, and our district dove into learning about strategies from the writing revolution with Judith Hochman and Natalie Wexler. And yeah, like writing is the best part because this is where we get to take all those skills and really put them in together and show what they know and what they can do and what they're capable of. So my students are using their decoding skills, their knowledge building, and yeah, so for me, this is really where the science of reading comes to life in my classroom. Because you think about the simple view of reading, you know, the word recognition times language comprehension, and you have a fluent reader. But for me, I get to see that modeled in my classroom every day. It truly, truly comes to life. And you know, with writing, it goes in phases, right? We start the year, and our oral language comprehension is always going to be better than our written, especially in kindergarten. And my kids were able to come up with this, with using vocabulary words and using a sentence stem, learning how to expand with your who, what, where, when, whys. Then, yeah, they can't type this, but they came up with this, and they were so proud of it, and they were able to say it. And this was September, when my kids are understanding this type of content, right? Invisible sound waves and vibrate. And literally last week I brought this up when we wrote that. They're like, yeah, I remember those. Like, this is really good. And, okay, I'm not going to play it. Well, I don't like that it shows black. Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to play the whole video of him talking, but in kindergarten then, so we really work on that oral language and being able to say and show our learning. And if you look at this, you think, that is such a cute little picture. Like, let's put that kindergarten picture up on the fridge. You know, you've got your cute flowers in the sky and whatnot. What else? But actually, when this student goes through and explains his writing, he starts talking about pollination, and he's talking about why seeds are important. Actually, he kind of explains like what cross-pollination is. I think in the video, he also I think it was him, he even talks about like germinate and using these really, really rich vocabulary words, but you would never get to do that if you didn't give them the opportunity to share their thinking. And we'll just listen to a hot second of it. Oh gosh, why isn't it? And like, that's what I love about my classroom though. Like, you can hear in the background the buzzing and all of the things that are happening because everybody has the autonomy to take their device. And I always like play it off as like, you're a YouTuber, you have to show your parents and you have to like show you're like, right? But they get so excited about that and they want to sound good. I'm like, think about your favorite because that was a thing. This class loved YouTubers. Like, think about how they talk about things and the way they use expression in their voice. And that was just the buy-in that they needed. And a lot of times that student would have never shared that in front of the whole class. But giving them that opportunity to share their learning in that capacity is just beautiful. And then it's also great evidence for me to keep and to share with the parents and to show their growth. And so we work really hard on that oral explanation of our work, and then we can move into, is this going to work now that I clicked it? Maybe? Come on. So yeah, then you put all of these skills together, and now you have your word recognition skills, your language comprehension, and you have kids that are writing pieces like this that I did not put any of these sentences on the board. I don't write sentences for my kids. I'll give them vocabulary words, right? He pulled the word honest off of the vocabulary wall where we already did, talked about that word. But I just love this piece because he wanted the people to stop. That was in the South, kindergarten. He knew, he had that understanding, he used all those skills. So I just think it's really beautiful, and honestly, before I came, I took all sorts of pictures of my kids writing before I came to this, because I was like, is there any way I can like throw these into my slides really quick? Because that's the area that I am just most proud of my kids, is that they come in, and these are their ideas. This is their thinking. This is their understanding. I'm not putting a sentence on the board, and then they're copying it on their paper and saying that it's their own. They are developing these skills, and they're growing. And yeah, and you know, my kindergartners are doing things that many people might not expect other kids their age to be doing. And then this didn't happen because my kids are different. This all happened because my instruction was different. So the last part, I don't know how much time I'll spend on data, but I mean, we all love data, right? We love spreadsheets. We love seeing all those pretty colors and all the things changing and growing and improving. Because why else would we do this work if we aren't going to celebrate our students' growth? So, and celebrating is by far one of my favorite parts of my job. So we know that the data matters. Data helps our planning, and we can collaborate with our teams, and we can support our kids, and they can truly become like goal crushers, right? So my students are very involved with their own data tracking throughout the entire year in all of their skills. And so they know what their goals are. So that celebration is just that much sweeter when they know that they've hit or crushed their goal. So with all of these research-based practices in place, this is the kind of growth that can happen. So in the 22-23 school year, this was our dibbles. And you can see at the beginning of the year, we had 36 kids intensive. By the end of the year, we had 2% intensive and 89% benchmark or above. Yeah. Oh, just wait. I think was this our first year that we did? It was either the first or second year that we had structured literacy in place at our school. But this is me throwing Elena on the spot. It was very close. So the following year, we started the year out with 21% intensive. We ended with 6% intensive. But we got up to 91% with our kids, benchmark and on grade level. And that year was super special for me as a classroom teacher because I had a roster that it was hard. It was a really hard year. And I had a lot of kids in there that typically would have had a lot of bias put against them. I had one student who was an English language learner that started who knew no English starting the year. And I had 3 students they were on IEPs and receiving special ed services. And this was my end of the year data for these kids. I also had one student who moved in the school district in April, sorry. He moved in April, so that was my strategic, but my EL student was benchmark. My SPED students were benchmark. And then the rest of my kids were just goal crushers, right? So that was a really fun year. Last year, I don't have my data for this year, which I cannot wait to see how well they do. Last year was amazing. We ended the year with 2%. We had 98% of our kindergarten students on benchmark or above. And that year for me, I actually went on maternity leave in February. And I had a student teacher in the fall, so I was able to show her all of the routines and practices and all of the great things that were happening in my classroom. So when she took over as my long-term sub, she already knew what to do, right? So she just got to keep going. And here's my class at the end of the year. I wasn't even there all year, right? Like, this kid he did not like doing that one. He had severe autism. He's like, I'm not telling you the sounds in the word. But then look at his scores on the other stuff. He literally would read the entire page and under a minute. So brilliant, brilliant child, but was not going to segment words for me ever. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Isn't that really cool? And now I've completely lost my spot. I'm like, gosh, look at those kids. But that's what happens. That is what happens when you are intentional with your instruction and moving forward and looking at data and having a deep knowledge as a teacher. And the big buzzword right now is teacher clarity, but truly if you have clarity in what you're teaching, look at what's possible.